The blackness of space was never truly silent. It roared with the dying screams of engines, the shuddering hum of weapons fire, and the guttural growls of ships tearing apart under pressure. Amidst the carnage of battle, Leon Carter gritted his teeth as his fighters spiraled through the wreckage of his squadron. Alarms blared in his cockpit, warning him of the inevitable. He was losing altitude, losing power, losing everything. The Velsari had struck fast and hard, reptilian warlords who reveled in the destruction of lesser species. The human fleet had been holding its own, but something had changed. A weapon unlike anything they had seen had crippled their defenses in mere moments. Leon had barely managed to evade the worst of it. But now he was paying the price. His ship was burning, its hull screaming as it was caught in the gravitational pull of an uncharted planet below. With a last desperate effort, he tried to stabilize the descent, but the controls were sluggish, unresponsive. The stars blurred as the planet's surface rushed toward him. He braced for impact, cursing under his breath as the ship slammed into the ground with bone-rattling force. Metal twisted and groaned, debris scattered in a fiery arc. And then, stillness. Pain flooded his senses as he unstrapped himself from the pilot's seat, his body aching from the violent crash. The canopy had shattered on impact, leaving him exposed to the harsh elements of this unknown world. He staggered out of the wreckage, each breath heavy, lungs burning. The air was dense with moisture, the ground uneven beneath his boots. Towering trees stretched toward the sky, their bark dark and metallic, their leaves shimmering with an eerie bioluminescence. The night was alive with sounds, distant, guttural roars, the rustling of unseen predators, and the faint whisper of something just beyond his perception. Leon scanned the horizon, trying to get his bearings. His ship was beyond repair, its frame little more than smoldering wreckage. His comms were dead. No way to signal for help. He was alone. Or so he thought. A presence stirred in the darkness, a ripple of energy that sent a chill down his spine. He turned sharply, his hand instinctively going to the plasma pistol at his hip. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with an ethereal grace that was almost unsettling. She was tall, her form cloaked in flowing dark fabric that shimmered like liquid starlight. Her skin was pale with a faint silver hue, her hair cascading down her back in waves of deep violet. But it was her eyes that held him in place, pools of luminous blue, shifting and unreadable. Leon had seen her kind before, the Velsari, an advanced telepathic species that had long remained neutral in the conflicts of the galaxy. He had never trusted them. Too distant, too detached, too alien. She studied him with an unreadable expression, her gaze flickering briefly to the wreckage before returning to him. Then, in a voice that was smooth yet edged with cautious curiosity, she spoke. "You are human." Leon exhaled sharply, tightening his grip on his weapon. "Yeah, no kidding. And you're Velsari. What are you doing here?" The woman hesitated before stepping closer, her movements deliberate. "My vessel crashed as well. I was on an observation mission when the Velsari weapon activated. The gravitational anomaly pulled my ship into its wake." She tilted her head slightly, as if assessing him. "You are injured." Leon gave a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "Yeah, well, I'll live." The Velsari woman continued to watch him, her expression giving away nothing. Then, without warning, she reached out. Leon took a step back, instincts flaring. "Hey, keep out of my head," he snapped. She withdrew her hand but didn't look offended. "I do not need to read your mind to see your pain." Leon gritted his teeth, glancing around. "Look, lady, I don't have time for alien mind tricks. We're stuck on a hostile planet. My squadron is probably dead, and the Velsari aren't exactly the forgiving type. If they find out we survived." A distant, guttural screech cut through the air, freezing them both in place. It was not the call of any creature Leon had ever heard before. It was deep, reverberating, almost metallic. The ground seemed to tremble in response. The Velsari woman turned her gaze toward the source of the sound. We are not alone. Leon exhaled sharply, forcing himself to push past his exhaustion. His body ached, his head throbbed, but survival demanded focus. "Yeah," he muttered, checking the charge on his pistol. "I kinda figured." Another roar echoed across the landscape, closer this time. Leon exchanged a look with the Velsari, realizing the uneasy truth, whether he trusted her or not. She was the only other living thing on this godforsaken planet that wasn't trying to kill him. For now, that would have to be enough. The ground rumbled beneath Leon's boots as the second screech split the air, closer this time, sharper, like metal scraping against metal. His grip on the plasma pistol tightened. His body still ached from the crash, but adrenaline dulled the pain. He turned to the Velsari woman, her glowing blue eyes fixed on the horizon. If she felt fear, she didn't show it. Leon took a slow breath, forcing his mind to focus. "You recognize that sound?" The Velsari's gaze remained distant, unreadable. "No, but I can feel them." "Feel them?" Liam's stomach twisted. He never liked telepaths, never trusted them, especially the Velsari with their unnerving way of seeing things that weren't there. "You mean you can read their thoughts?" She shook her head slightly. "Not thoughts. Intent." Leon clenched his jaw. That didn't make him feel any better. The jungle around them was thick, the alien trees looming high with twisted metallic branches. Bioluminescent vines coiled around their trunks like glowing veins, pulsing faintly in the dim light. Strange creatures skittered through the underbrush, their iridescent eyes reflecting the glow. The air was damp, thick with a scent Leon couldn't quite place. Something sharp, almost chemical. Another tremor. Closer. Leon forced himself to move. Standing still meant waiting to die. "We need to get to higher ground. If we can find a ridge or something, we might be able to spot a way out of here." The Velsari hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Agreed." Leon led the way, weaving through the dense foliage, stepping carefully to avoid making too much noise. The terrain sloped upward slightly, a good sign. If they could get high enough, maybe they could get a visual on the crash site, find out if any other humans had survived. He glanced back at the woman following him. She moved with an eerie silence, her form barely making a sound as she navigated the uneven ground. Leon had seen Velsari before, but never this close. Her kind usually stayed out of human affairs, observing from a distance, always watching but never interfering. He wasn't sure if he trusted her now, but she was here, and for the moment, that made them allies. They climbed higher, the thick jungle giving way to a rocky incline. From here, the view stretched across the alien landscape, illuminated by two moons hanging low in the sky. Far in the distance, the remains of the battle flickered, burning debris from fallen ships scattered across the land like dying embers. Leon's chest tightened. He knew what that meant. The Velsari had won. The fleet was gone. A sudden pulse of energy shot through the air, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He turned sharply, catching the faint shimmer of movement below. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but then he saw them, shifting forms emerging from the trees, blending into the environment like living shadows. Leon's heart pounded. They're cloaked. The Velsari's eyes narrowed. Not cloaked. Adapted. Their biology allows them to bend light around their bodies, but they are not invisible to me. Leon didn't care what they were. He cared that they were hunting. And they were getting closer. He pressed his back against a boulder, steadying his breath. How many? A pause. Then 7. No, 8. Leon muttered a curse under his breath. Great. Any chance they're friendly? The Velsari didn't answer, but the flicker of tension in her expression was enough. Leon exhaled. Yeah. Figured. The shapes moved with inhuman fluidity, weaving through the jungle with a predator's patience. Leon had faced the Velsari before in battle, but this was different. These weren't mindless brutes charging headfirst into a fight. These were hunters, calculated, precise. The air grew unnaturally still. Then, without warning, the first attack came. A burst of movement. Leon barely had time to react before something lunged from the trees, a blur of sleek, metallic flesh. He fired on instinct, the plasma bolt slamming into the creature's shoulder. It staggered, hissing, but it didn't fall. Its body shimmered, its form solidifying into something monstrous, taller than a man, armored scales shifting like liquid metal. Its elongated skull bore a row of needle-like fangs, and its four arms flexed with unnatural agility, twin blades extending from each wrist. Leon's blood ran cold. He didn't have time to process before another one lunged. The Velsari moved in a blur, her body twisting in a way that seemed impossible. With a flick of her hand, a pulse of energy rippled through the air, slamming into the attacker and sending it sprawling against a rock. Leon didn't hesitate. He fired again, hitting the creature square in the chest. This time, it stayed down. The jungle erupted into chaos. The remaining hunters broke into a full charge, their bodies flickering in and out of visibility. Leon fired rapidly, forcing them to weave and dodge, but they were fast, too fast. One of them leaped from the shadows, aiming directly for him. Leon barely had time to react before the Velsari stepped in front of him. Her hand shot forward, fingers splayed, and a shockwave of kinetic energy blasted outward. The hunter was thrown back midair, its body crashing against a tree with a sickening crack. Leon didn't have time to be impressed. He ducked as another blade swiped for his head, barely missing by inches. He countered with a shot to the leg, dropping the creature to one knee. With a savage kick, he sent it tumbling backward, buying himself a moment to breathe. But they were still outnumbered. Leon's mind raced. They couldn't hold this position. The Velsari were adapting, learning their movements. Sooner or later, one of them would get through. "We need to move," he shouted. The Velsari nodded, already shifting her stance. Leon fired another shot to cover their retreat, then turned and ran. The Velsari kept pace beside him, her movements fluid, unhurried. Behind them, the hunters gave chase, their screeches tearing through the night. Leon didn't know how long they could keep running. He didn't know if there was even a way off this planet. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going down without a fight. The jungle pulsed with an eerie glow as Leon and the Velsari woman sprinted through the dense underbrush. The air was thick, humid, and stifling, but he barely noticed. His mind was too busy calculating the odds of survival. Behind them, the Velsari hunters moved like shadows, their shifting forms flickering between visibility and nothingness. Every time Leon thought they had gained some distance, another screech would pierce the night, reminding him that they were still being tracked. The terrain grew uneven, jagged rock formations jutting out from the ground like the bones of a long-dead beast. The incline was steep, but Leon pushed forward, lungs burning, muscles screaming in protest. The Velsari moved with unnatural grace, her glowing eyes scanning ahead. She wasn't just running, she was searching. For what Leon wasn't sure, but he hoped she found it soon. Another shriek, closer this time. Leon didn't stop to look. He tightened his grip on the plasma pistol, flicking the power setting to maximum. If it came down to it, he'd make sure he took as many of them with him as he could. Then, without warning, the Velsari grabbed his wrist and pulled him sharply to the left. Leon nearly lost his footing as she yanked him toward a narrow crevice between two massive rock formations. The passage was barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, but she moved with certainty, guiding him deeper into the stone corridor. Leon's back scraped against the rough surface as he forced himself through, the space growing narrower with each step. His breath came in short, ragged bursts. The distant screeches of the Velsari echoed off the rock walls, making it impossible to tell how close they were. Then, suddenly, the passage opened into a cavern. Leon stumbled forward, barely catching himself before he fell. The chamber was vast, stretching out into darkness, the ceiling disappearing into the void above. Strange, Bioluminescent vines cascaded down from the walls, casting the space in a soft, ghostly glow. Pools of iridescent liquid dotted the floor, their surfaces rippling like liquid glass. Leon exhaled sharply, taking a moment to regain his bearings. "You got a plan, or are we just hiding in a cave waiting to die?" The Velsari ignored his sarcasm, stepping forward with a calculated precision. "This place is old. Very old." Her voice was quieter now, almost reverent. "I can feel the echoes of those who were here before." Leon frowned, glancing around. "You're saying someone used to live here?" "Not live, but exist." Leon didn't like the way she said that. He took a cautious step forward, his boots splashing slightly in the strange liquid. It was thicker than water, clinging to his soles like oil. He crouched, dipping a finger into it, watching as it shimmered with unnatural hues. It didn't burn, didn't smell. It was just there. "Any chance this stuff is toxic?" The Velsari shook her head. "It's not harmful to us." Leon wasn't sure if that was supposed to be reassuring. A sound from the passage made him snap back to attention. A low, guttural growl. Leon tensed. The Velsari had found them. The Velsari turned sharply, her glowing eyes narrowing. "They hesitate." Leon didn't like that either. "Why?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, she said, "They fear this place." Leon felt his stomach tighten. The Velsari weren't the type to fear anything. If they were hesitating, it meant something worse was down here. His grip tightened on his pistol. "Great. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." A sudden pulse of energy rippled through the air. Leon felt it in his bones, a deep, resonating hum that made his skin prickle. The cavern seemed to respond, the glowing vines pulsing in sync with the vibration. The pools of liquid trembled, their surfaces distorting. Then, slowly, something began to rise from the largest pool. Leon took a step back, instincts screaming at him to run. A shape emerged from the liquid. Tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its body was elongated, its limbs too thin, its skin shifting like liquid metal. There were no eyes, no mouth, only a smooth, featureless face that tilted slightly as if listening. Leon raised his pistol. "Any idea what that is?" The Velsari's expression remained unreadable. "A remnant." Leon didn't lower his weapon. "That's a nice, vague answer. You want to be a little more specific." "It is not alive," she said carefully, "but it remembers." Leon wasn't sure what that meant, but he was certain of one thing. He didn't want to stick around to find out. The figure took a step forward. The liquid beneath it didn't ripple. It moved with it, like it was a part of the being itself. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. It just watched. Then, it turned its head toward the entrance of the cavern, toward the Velsari. A sound, low, vibrating, emanated from the remnant. The walls of the cavern trembled. The air grew thick, heavy with something Leon couldn't describe. And then, the Velsari screamed. Not their hunting cries, not their war shrieks. This was different. This was terror. Leon barely had time to process before the passage behind them erupted with movement. The Velsari, apex predators, ruthless killers, were fleeing. Their flickering forms dashed past the entrance, their bodies moving with a desperation Leon had never seen before. They weren't trying to hunt anymore. They were trying to escape. Leon exhaled slowly, lowering his pistol slightly. He turned back to the remnant, its featureless face still angled toward the passage. It hadn't moved, hadn't reacted. But somehow, without a single action, it had sent the Velsari running. Leon swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if that made him feel safer or more afraid. Leon stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his body refused to obey. The remnant stood motionless, its liquid metal form eerily still, as if waiting. The cavern was deathly silent now, the echoes of the Velsari's terrified retreat fading into the darkness. Only the slow, rhythmic pulse of the glowing vines remained, casting shifting shadows across the walls. The Velsari woman, whom Leon still didn't fully trust, moved first. She took a single step forward, her glowing eyes locked on the remnant. There was something almost reverent in her stance, a quiet acknowledgement of something ancient. Leon's grip on his plasma pistol tightened. "You want to tell me what's going on?" The Velsari didn't look at him. "It remembers." "You keep saying that," Leon snapped, frustration breaking through his unease. "What does that mean?" The remnant's head tilted slightly, as if responding to his voice. The movement was unnervingly smooth, almost unnatural. "It is not alive as you and I understand life," the Velsari said softly. "It is a fragment, a sliver of something that once was, a consciousness without time." Leon exhaled sharply. "That doesn't explain why the Velsari ran like hell." The Velsari finally turned to face him. "Because even they know fear." Leon didn't like that answer. The remnant moved. It didn't walk, didn't shift. One moment it was in one spot, and the next it was closer, as if reality had simply adjusted to its presence. Leon tensed, raising his pistol, but the Velsari lifted a hand. "Do not." Leon didn't lower his weapon, but he didn't fire either. His gut told him that if he attacked, the result wouldn't be in his favor. The remnant lifted one elongated arm, liquid metal fingers stretching outward. The air around them grew thick with an unseen force, pressing against Leon's skin like static before a storm. Then the world shifted. Leon wasn't in the cavern anymore, or at least it didn't feel like it. He was standing in the same spot, but suddenly, the walls around him weren't made of rock. They were smooth, metallic, humming with a deep, resonant energy. Light, pure, golden, and endless, poured from cracks in the air itself, spilling across a floor that stretched into infinity. Leon's heart pounded. He wasn't sure if he was standing in reality anymore. The Velsari was beside him, her glowing eyes widening in something that looked like awe. "A memory," she whispered. Leon swallowed hard. "Whose?" A voice, deep, layered, and echoing from everywhere and nowhere, answered. "Yours." Leon felt the breath hitch in his throat. The light coalesced, forming shapes, shadows of figures he didn't recognize. Towers stretching toward an unfamiliar sky. Ships, massive, sleek, unlike anything humanity had ever built, soaring through an atmosphere that shimmered with a golden hue. Then came the war. The vision shifted, flashing too quickly for Leon to fully process. Beings, tall, robed, glowing with the same energy that filled this space, standing against an encroaching darkness. Weapons unlike anything he had ever seen tearing through the void. The same ships from before, now burning, falling, breaking apart in the chaos of a battle waged beyond the limits of human understanding. And then, silence. The golden figures were gone. The cities had crumbled. The ships lay scattered like the bones of giants. And in the center of it all, standing alone in the wreckage of something once magnificent, was the remnant. Leon's breath came in shallow gasps. "What the hell is this?" The voice echoed again. The end. The vision shattered. Leon stumbled, nearly falling as reality snapped back into place. He was in the cavern again, his chest heaving, sweat dampening his forehead. The remnant still stood before him, unchanged, unmoving. Leon ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady himself. That wasn't my memory." The Velsari was still staring at the remnant, her expression unreadable. "No, but it is yours now." Leon's stomach twisted. What the hell does that mean? The remnant finally moved again, its featureless face tilting downward. Its liquid metal form shimmered, and for the first time, Leon thought he saw something within its shifting depths, a reflection of something else, something hidden beneath its surface. "You are here because the cycle must not repeat." Leon's mouth went dry. "Cycle?" The cavern trembled. The glowing vines pulsed faster, their light flickering wildly. The pools of liquid began to ripple, as if disturbed by an unseen force. The Velsari took a sharp breath. Something is coming. Leon's pulse spiked. Something worse than the Velsari. The remnant remained still for a long moment. Then it spoke one last time. The enemy was never the hunters. Leon felt the temperature in the cavern drop. It was what made them run. A sound, low, distant, and growing, echoed through the tunnels. It wasn't a screech like the Velsari. It wasn't the tremor of shifting rock. It was laughter. And it was getting closer. Leon had heard many terrible things in his life. Dying breaths, war cries, the cold finality of silence after a fight. But nothing had ever unnerved him like the laughter echoing through the cavern. It was deep, layered, and wrong, as if multiple voices were speaking at once, each slightly out of sync with the others. It slithered through the tunnels, stretching impossibly long, filling the space with a sense of creeping dread. The Velsari stiffened beside him, her glowing eyes narrowing. "We need to move." Leon didn't argue. The remnant stood motionless, its liquid metal body pulsing with faint ripples. The cavern trembled, the luminous vines flickering in erratic patterns. Something was disrupting the balance of this place, something ancient and hungry. Leon's fingers twitched on his plasma pistol. "I'm guessing you know what that is." The Velsari turned, already moving. "If we linger, we won't have to guess." Leon shot one last glance at the remnant, but it did not follow. It remained where it stood, as if its role in this moment was already decided. Whatever it had been trying to tell him, whatever memory it had shared, it had left him with only half answers and a growing sense of unease. Then the laughter changed. It became sharper, clearer, as if the source was no longer lurking in the distance, but standing just behind them. Leon didn't hesitate. He ran. The tunnels twisted around them, the walls narrowing and widening unpredictably. The terrain was uneven, jagged, forcing them to move carefully even in their haste. The luminous vines cast eerie shadows, flickering as if they, too, were afraid. Behind them, the laughter grew closer. Leon risked a glance back and saw something moving in the darkness. It wasn't like the Velsari with their grotesque, multi-limbed frames. This was something else, something shifting, folding into itself, a silhouette that never stayed the same shape for more than a second. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned like dying embers, flaring and fading with each step. Leon's stomach twisted. "What the hell is that?" The Velsari didn't answer. She grabbed his wrist and yanked him forward, her grip surprisingly strong. A sudden tremor shook the cavern, sending dust and debris cascading from the ceiling. Leon nearly lost his footing but managed to steady himself against the wall. The ground beneath them groaned, and for a terrifying moment, he thought the tunnel was going to collapse. Then, just ahead, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. Leon barely registered the intricate carvings on the walls, the ancient symbols that glowed faintly with residual energy. His focus was on the towering structure at the center, a monolithic construct of black stone and luminous circuitry, pulsing in slow rhythmic beats. The Velsari exhaled sharply. A gate. Leon didn't have time to ask what she meant. The laughter was nearly upon them. She sprinted toward the monolith, pressing her palm against its surface. The structure reacted instantly, veins of golden energy spreading from her touch, activating mechanisms unseen. The very air shifted, charged with an invisible force. Leon whirled, raising his pistol as the entity emerged from the tunnel. It was closer now, its form barely comprehensible. Shadows stretched and twisted, writhing with unnatural fluidity. It didn't move like a living thing. It simply existed, flickering in and out of space like a broken signal. Leon fired. The plasma bolt lanced through the entity, illuminating it for the briefest moment. He caught a glimpse of something beneath the shifting darkness, something skeletal and ancient, its form bound by forces beyond his understanding. The shot did nothing. The entity continued forward, unaffected. The laughter stopped. Then it spoke. "You were never meant to see." Leon's pulse thundered. The monolith behind him flared, its circuits blazing with power. The Velsari's hands moved in intricate patterns, manipulating controls he couldn't see. The entity took another step. "They buried us in time, but time does not forget." The temperature dropped. Leon could see his breath now, misting in the cold air. His instincts screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The monolith let out a deep, resonant hum. The Velsari's voice cut through the tension. "Leon, get to me." He didn't hesitate. He turned and sprinted toward her, just as the monolith surged with energy, enveloping them in a sudden wave of golden light. The entity lunged, and the world shattered. Leon was weightless, suspended in a void of endless light. There was no ground, no sky, only infinity stretching in all directions. Then, slowly, reality coalesced. He felt solid ground beneath his feet, the scent of something familiar in the air. The oppressive weight of the entity's presence was gone. Leon opened his eyes. He wasn't in the cavern anymore. He was standing beneath a sky filled with stars, the horizon stretching into an unfamiliar but breathtaking landscape. Towering structures, sleek and alien, rose in the distance. Strange, luminous flora swayed in an unseen breeze. The Velsari stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Leon exhaled. "Where are we?" She turned to him, her glowing eyes reflecting the endless expanse before them. "A beginning,"